Okay guys, so my sauce is finished making completely. I left it to cool and now I'm gonna put it inside the jars. Hi everybody, welcome to my channel. It's Hazel from the Israelite Women's Homestead channel. So today we are talking about canning. Now, I've been canning for years and years, and I can say I'm very versed in canning, and I've been canning very successfully for years. So today I am making a video because I want to talk about safety in canning. Because I know a lot of people are canning things, but I don't see a lot of videos talking about safety, how to can food safely, and how to prevent mold and spoilage and stuff like that. I've also noticed that a lot of people are canning, but they are using a water bath canning for a lot of things, which you should not necessarily use a water bath canning for. So I'm going to make a series of videos talking about different things that you can and what method you should use to can them, or should you can them at all, or whether you should freeze them. So in this first video, I am really going to talk about the safety of canning, and today I'm going to talk about general things in canning. So the first thing I'm going to talk about canning is not a new thing. People have been canning foods for a generation. But what we, the modern canners, have to realize is a lot of these canning techniques that was used way back then have not been passed on to us. So a lot of us don't know a lot of these canning techniques. We don't know what weight of pot they used, because they didn't have this very sophisticated pressure cooker with the pressure thing at the top and all that stuff at a certain period, a certain time back then. They had heavy pots and cauldrons and different things that they did their canning with. So, but they were using heavier pots which keep heat. Well, those pots kept heat. There wasn't like thin pots that didn't keep the heat. So we have to keep that in mind when we're canning. So a lot of these water bath canners are not pots that really keep heat and get really, really hot. Like I have some very heavy cast iron pots that since I was a child, like my grandparents used, and these pots are super heavy and they hold heat. Like you can cook food in a pot and leave the food in the pot, and 2 hours later the pot is still hot. So these are the kind of pots that you want to have when you're canning certain things. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is talking about canning meat. Now, I don't can meat at all. And the reason why I don't can meat is because I don't eat a lot of meat. One, me and my family, we eat a very small amount of meat. We more eat greens and vegetables. And so we don't need to can a lot of meat because we have a deep freezer, and this is good enough for us. That's why we keep all our meats, and it's very big and it holds a lot of meat, so we really don't need to can anything. And secondly of all, if I don't really like the taste of canned meat. So that's a next thing. We personally like to cook our meat at a certain texture. And I find when you can the meat, the texture that I like is not there. So I don't really can meat. I freeze all my meat, and I use a food saver to freeze my meat for long-term storage. So that's how I freeze my meat, or I dry meat, or I salt meat. So I salt a lot of beef, and the salting of the beef have been taught to me by my grandmother since I was a child. So I'm able to salt my beef or lamb or any kind of venison for a long period of time. and it lasts a long time. When you're ready to make it, you just have to put it to soak in water and you cook it as normal, and it keeps the texture and the flavor just as how we like it. So I do that instead of canning my meat. But if I do have to can my meat, I'll definitely do that. But I'll talk about that in another video, how I definitely will can my meat and how I know how to can it. So going back to the to canning meat, what I want to say is I already said that I don't can because of the texture. We don't like the texture that the meat have when you can it. But one of my concern with people canning meat is without a pressure canner and using a water bath. You have to be very careful when you canning meat, because if you're canning meat and it's not cooked properly, you could have some problems with that. You can, get sick from that. So this is my concern. I see people are canning, like they put raw meat inside the mason jars and they put it in a water bath, and it's not a long enough period of time to thoroughly cook the meat, and then they cool it and they put it on the shelf. In my personal opinion, and my experience, if you're gonna can a meat, I you need to cook it for a long period of time, 45, 50 to an hour. An hour is my max to cook meat before I think it's properly canned and can be preserved properly if you're gonna can meat. So this is for newbies and beginners. If you're canning meat and you're using a water bath without a pressure cooker, I would say 1 hour. I would say you have to leave it for 1 hour, especially if you're doing beef or if you're doing like deer or some kind of meat like that. You have to let it cook properly before you take it out of the water bath and leave it to cool, because by doing that you ensure that the meat is cooked properly and no bacteria is going to develop in the meat. Now, meat is another thing about meat is it doesn't have enough acidity, right? So if when you're canning meat, there's a couple of things that you can do to keep the meat really good and to prevent spoilage or building of bacteria, because you can't see bacteria in your meat unless you eat. The way you're gonna know that something is not good is you eat it, then it's gonna make you sick, maybe have a bellyache, have diarrhea or something like that, or worse, you can have botulism. So meat doesn't have enough acidity in it. So what you want to do is when you're doing meat, you want to put a little bit of apple cider vinegar inside your meat, not a lot, about a teaspoon inside your meat. It's not going to really change the flavor of the meat, but it's going to add acidity to the meat, and it's going to prevent bad bacteria from growing. Something else that you want to add to your meat too, you can add celery salt, or you can add citric acid. And citric acid tends to make the meat keep its color, and it brings up the pH of the meat, the sauce, and the gravy and the meat itself, so it prevents spoilage. So, and also you can add half of a cinnamon stick inside your meat also. Just a little note with the cinnamon stick, it depends on where the cinnamon comes from. And if it's very good cinnamon, the meat may taste a little cinnamonish if you put like a whole cinnamon stick, but just put a small piece of cinnamon stick in there, and that will be really, really good. So these are a few tips that I want to talk about when canning meat, and when it comes to safety with meat per se, because I see a lot of people are canning meat and I don't think it is properly canned, and I think there's not enough acidity in the meat. And if you want your meat to last long and you don't want it to kind of deteriorate and become too soft and soggy and stuff like that, you gotta have to take those steps to can the meat in those tips that I tell you, because if you don't, you could have an issue. I know some people, they said they don't have any issues, and that's very good. I guess you guys are putting in stuff that that works well for you all, or maybe the texture, that you like the texture doesn't bother you or anything like that. but this video is just for beginners who are going to be canning meat. And I just want to bring these tips out because these things are very, very important. And I know everybody is canning, and it's a very good thing because, you know, food shortage and all that kind of stuff, preparing for hard times, and when the supermarket can no longer provide the amount of food that we necessarily need. So it's very good if you can have your own meat and grow your own chickens and your animals and provide your own meat. So that's excellent. But also in that process, you want to make sure that you do things correctly and that you preserve your food properly. And at the end of the day, we all want to have good food, healthy food, and food that is preserved properly. Nobody wants to open a can of meat or anything for your family and you all get sick. So these are my couple of tips today for canning meat safely. And if you want to see more of those videos, just continue on my playlist and you're going to see a whole list of videos talking about safety in canning. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.